This video is brought to you by Chubbies. Get 20% off at chubbyshorts.com with the code DAN20 and stay tuned after the video for more info. Hello everybody and welcome to my spoiler review of Sinners, which is shaping up to be the #1 movie this weekend. And yes, I do get the irony of talking about a movie called Sinners on Easter Sunday, but hey, that's just how the release calendar worked out. And I'm also celebrating the 5-year anniversary of this channel. That's right, 5 years ago today, believe it or not, I started the channel after I left everybody over at Screen Junkies, and I've got some things that I'm lining up as far as celebration goes, so stay tuned for that. But let's talk about Sinners, and you know, it's rare, somewhat rare for me to do a spoiler review here on the channel for a movie that's not a superhero movie or not one of the big quote-unquote blockbuster or franchise films, but there was so much that I didn't talk about in my non-spoiler review that I wanted to talk about. I decided to go ahead and make one anyway. And if you saw my non-spoiler review, you will know, and this is, by the way, your final spoiler warning if you haven't seen Sinners, that I didn't even mention that the movie was about vampires. I used the word marshmallows as a filler word, and I got a lot of reaction from people saying, everybody knew it was about vampires. What are you talking about? Everybody saw the second trailer. Everybody saw the announcements on the movie. And I will agree that probably the majority of people did. But first of all, I heard from some people that didn't, so not everybody knew. And I've also in the past been raked over the coals for talking about movies after they even came out. Abigail was one where the vampires were in the trailers. Some people are probably going to yell at me about it now. And I mentioned it when I was talking about box office. It's like, I haven't seen it yet. You just spoiled the movie for me. And most importantly, having seen the movie at that time, I was thinking in my head how much cooler it would be if I'd seen it and not known that it was about vampires. So I decided to use that filler word. And you know, if 10 people saw my review and went into the movie cold and kind of got that as a surprise, then it's worth it to me. So yes, I understand that the majority of people knew that it was about vampires, but I decided to go less spoilery than more spoilery in my review. And that's honestly a choice that I'd make again. And that second trailer didn't just give away that there are vampires in the movie. It gave away things like Haley Steinfeld's character and Stack becoming vampires. And I think that's just an absolutely needless giveaway. I have no idea why Warner Brothers felt it was necessary to give that much away, even if they did want to sell it on the vampire thing. And I think that it was a bit of a double-edged sword to sell it as a vampire movie, because I saw some reactions from people in my comments and elsewhere saying that they didn't like the movie because it was too slow, because it took too long to get to the vampire stuff. There wasn't enough of it. And that's the risk you run if you sell the movie that way, because people go in expecting a straightforward vampire movie. And what Ryan Coogler did, especially in the first half of the film, I don't know if you can hear the thunderstorm happening, by the way, sorry about that. What Ryan Coogler did in the first half of the film is to establish the characters, establish their relationships with each other, establish the themes of the movie. And then once all that is done, all the vampire stuff is payoff to that. And I think that's what elevated the movie, in my opinion, beyond what would have been a really good vampire movie into what I think was just a really, really good movie overall. But I did really like Coogler's take on vampires, the way that the light behind their eyes would shine when they started to reveal their nature. I love the scene where Cornbread is turned into a vampire in the woods and you just see their eyes shining with the fireflies. The scene where Haley Steinfeld is walking away and you see Remick, Jack O'Connell's eyes, bright red in the background, and then he just lifts off the air and just kind of floats away. But then they cut away from that. I love that Ryan Coogler held back from the gore and didn't show it all to us right away, because I think that that just made it more worth it later on when the movie really started to pour it on. And I think it was that subtlety of the first half that just underscored what made everything better about the second half. I was also happy to see so many people praising the sequence where Sammy plays music and connects to the spiritual world, and we see all eras of music and dance collide. That is just spectacular filmmaking from Ryan Coogler. When Ryan Coogler expanded that IMAX ratio and the camera started sweeping around, we saw all of these different figures from history and music and everything else gathering together. Ludwig Göransson's music, which was fantastic, as I said in my non-spoiler review, really kicking in. That was, like, to me, again, Martin Scorsese meme, that's cinema. That is the pure possibility of the cinematic art form. It's the marriage of everything, of story, of visuals, of sound design, of music. And I honestly think that a lot of, cinephiles or whatever you want to call movie fans, they chase those moments. I certainly do. and hope to get them in every movie. Of course, you don't get them in every movie. You get them in maybe a handful of movies a year, but that is one of those moments that's just like laser etched into my brain. One that I remember from last year was in Dune Part 2, that scene with Paul and Chani on the sand dune when they kiss each other, and you have the camera swooping out. You have that great Hans Zimmer score behind it. That to me was another etch it on my brain moment. And that's why I go to the movies, to find moments like that. And it was so great to see it in Sinners. And it's honestly one that I'm never going to forget. And aside from that, what I loved about the movie is that it told a big story, not just in scope, but as far as its metaphorical layers and everything else. I mean, obviously, this is a movie that's set in the Jim Crow South in the 1930s. So there's going to be a racial element to that. But beyond the textual layers of that, the conflicts between the characters in that time, I thought that there was a much deeper level, or several deeper levels, of metaphor and allegory that were going on. For me, the movie was very much about cultural appropriation. You have a celebration of black music and culture going on in this old sawmill, and then Remick shows up and wants to come play his music. And he says that he wants to create one shared culture, but what he really wants to do is to absorb the music that Sammy plays, in other words, black culture, and shape it into what he decides is appropriate. And so what we have is a battle between cultural authenticity and a celebration of heritage and this larger societal force that comes along trying to co-opt it. And it's all done in ways that are intrinsic to the plot. The concept of the vampire hive mind, for example, is very appropriate for a vampire horror film, but I think it also works on a level when you're talking about the monoculture or things that are just absorbed into culture, whether they want to be or not. And here we have blues music, which in the years after this movie was set would transform and morph into rhythm and blues, which would then be absorbed into rock and roll. And a lot of white artists were able to succeed by using the music that black artists, lesser known black artists, had made popular, music that was tied to their culture and their roots, and in many ways was absorbed into the mainstream. That's not necessarily always a terrible thing, but I think that that's basically what the outer level of this movie is about. This idea of creating a culture for yourself and creating a culture that's tied to something that's very personal to you, and then people coming in and saying, hey, no, I want that. And you know what? I even think that I can do that better. One of the reasons that I think Sinners is so popular with audiences, it got an A cinema score, which is practically unheard of for a horror movie. It's gotten high recommendation scores. It's doing well at the box office this weekend. The reason why so many people connect to it is that it works on so many different levels. So if you have people that are going there just for a horror movie, just for a vampire movie, then they're being well served. If you have people that are going there for the craft and the filmmaking element, they're being served. If you have people that are going for those deeper subtextual layers of storytelling, they're being served. It's a movie that is really able to meet people in so many different places. And that is common across so many movies, across so many genres, where a movie does well. It's able to meet people where they are, but it doesn't feel like it's watered down or that it's a lowest common denominator movie. We talk about those movies on the channel a lot too, the ones that want to be for everybody but end up being for nobody. Here, Ryan Coogler made a very personal film about very specific things, but because he's a talented writer and he's a talented filmmaker and he surrounded himself with some very talented craftspeople and actors, he's able to make that universal. And that's real rare. That's very rare to find in a filmmaker. And I'm glad that he was able to negotiate with Warner Brothers good terms for directing this movie. He got part of the first dollar gross. He's getting the rights back after, I think, 25 years. He's showing his value as a filmmaker. Now, the one element that I mentioned, but not specifically in my other review, about the ending that stuck out a bit to me was Smoke's killing of the KKK guys. It was a great ending for him as a character, but I felt like they should have been more of a presence in the film itself for it to feel not as tacked on, in my opinion, as it was. We see the guys selling them at the mill at the beginning. It's mentioned that their plan was to kill everybody at one point, but then they just sort of show up in the morning. And I get why they had to show up in the morning, because the sunrise is what gets rid of most of your vampires. So you couldn't really have them show up at night, or then it becomes a bit muddled. But then it also seems kind of weird that they had this big plan, but they didn't show up until the day after. You think that there would be fewer people there. It just felt a little little messy. That's one of the elements that felt a little messy. It's not the act itself. Again, I think that was important specifically for Smoke's character to sort of close out a lot of his character development. But it did feel like it wasn't as well woven into the rest of the story as what we'd seen before. It did open the door for a very emotional ending for Smoke, and I loved how that was shown, him getting to reunite with Annie and his son. Wunmi Musaku was very good as Annie, and I liked how the movie portrayed the supernatural or the spirit realm or whatever you want to call it as this kind of all-inclusive thing. There were elements of all different kinds of beliefs and religions that were present and that were shown to be effective throughout the movie, but it really just kind of broke down to good and evil. And these are the two major forces that divide our world, and it didn't get too wrapped up on denominations and this belief and that belief. It really was just this stark divide between the angels and the demons that exist in our realm and this eternal conflict between them. In supporting roles, Wunmi Musaku was great, Haley Steinfeld was great, and I just want to single out Delroy Lindo again because pound for pound, I think that he might be the MVP actor in just about anything that he's in. I mean, he made a predictable poop joke funny in this movie, and for whatever reason, he never seems to get the mainstream or the awards credit that he deserves, and I hope that changes because I don't want him to be one of those actors that we just miss a whole lot when he's gone. I want him to be one of those actors that we appreciate a lot when he's here as well. Now, in my non-spoiler review, I told people not to get up when the credits rolled because there was something extra, and I want to talk a little bit about that epilogue, which I couldn't really talk about at all in my earlier review, which is set in the 90s. You have blues musician Buddy Guy playing an older Sammy, and then there's the reveal that Stack and Mary survived, and they come to see older Sammy at the club where he's playing music. And at first, I thought that this was setting up to be that old-fashioned kind of horror movie tag, one last confrontation. Maybe the old guy finally gets rid of these last two vampires. But Ryan Coogler had something a lot more interesting in mind with that. And I was confused at first why they seemed so chill, why they weren't there specifically to absorb Sammy like the mission was back in the 1930s, why they didn't seem as aggressive. And then I remembered that the whole thing behind the 30s attack was that they were attached to Remick and to this hive mind, and he was basically driving their hatred. His mission was their mission, and when he was eliminated, then the vampires that were left were sort of disconnected from him, and they returned to basically who they were before. And so instead of these vicious, bloodthirsty vampires, we now have these two people that wanted to be together, that found a way to be together forever, and then showed up not to threaten Sammy with vampirism, but to say, hey, this could actually be a way to save you. You could stick around longer and play music longer. You could join us, and it's not about usurping you or getting rid of this music or absorbing it. It's about making sure that you're here longer to appreciate it. And it just felt so much more resonant than another horror movie or blood splatter beat would have been. That would have been a big crowd pleaser, but I liked that it really did feel like an epilogue and that it wasn't the ending of the story with one big bang. It was this sort of quiet whisper where we catch up with these characters afterward. And I really appreciated it. After I thought a little bit and thought about how it tied back to the movie that we'd already seen, I liked it. And I liked the ending for those characters. And again, I don't think that a whole lot of directors would have ended their movie that way. They either would have left that out or they would have tried to give it a bigger punch. But I think that just shows where Ryan Coogler's priorities were in this. He wanted to make a great horror movie, and he did, but at the same time, he wanted to tell a story first, and a story of these specific characters first. And that's where he ended the movie. And it's a movie that I am a big fan of. I've been thinking about it really all week since I've seen it. I'm looking forward to the next time that I get a chance to see it. And it is good to see so many people openly embracing an original film. I mean, this one's not based on any pre-existing stuff, except for the concept of vampires. A movie that is not necessarily a franchise film. I don't really see them making a sequel. I'm sure Warner Brothers is going to go after them for one. And one that is just so distinctive and daring in its vision and what Ryan Coogler wanted to say and how he wanted to say it. I like that the audiences out there are embracing it. So those are some of my spoiler thoughts on Sinners. What about you? What were your favorite parts? What were some of the parts that you didn't like as much? Let me know down in the comments below. And before we go, I want to thank the sponsor for this video, Chubbies. It's April, and the last thing you want is to look like the fool who's still dressing for winter. You want an outfit that says, "Come and get me, summer," and Chubbies has every possible option that you can think of. I've been outside a lot lately enjoying the great weather and wearing my pair of original stretch shorts. They're lightweight, they feel great on those warmer days, and they're perfect for playing soccer in the afternoon and hitting up the local brewery afterwards. I'm much better at one of those two things. I'm also a fan of their Friday shirt, which is my go-to for a casual afternoon. And honestly, you deserve a wardrobe upgrade for springtime. And for a limited time, Chubbies is giving fans of the show 20% off your order with my exclusive code DAN20 at chubbyshorts.com. And I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't mention Chubby's classic line swim collection. They're both great looking and feature 4-way stretch fabric that dries quick, so you don't have to walk around the pool or the beach with the dreaded drippy shorts. Whether you're getting dressed for your workday, a workout, or a weekend getaway, Chubbies has you covered. For a limited time, Chubbies is giving fans of the show 20% off your order with my code DAN20 at chubbyshorts.com. That's code DAN20 at chubbyshorts.com. Support the show and tell them that I sent you. Don't blend in with the crowd. Stand out with Chubbies. Thanks so much to Chubbies for sponsoring this video, and thank you for watching. Be sure to stay tuned right here for more movie news, reviews, box office, and more as we move past this 5-year anniversary and further on into the future. Until next time, stay safe, and I'll see you then. Bye.